He was country music's rough-hewn poet of the everyman, a high-lonesome baritone who turned freight train regrets into three-chord confessionals. Yet when Merle Ronald Haggard exhaled for the final time, on April 6, 2016, his 79th birthday, almost nobody filled the quiet of his modest ranch bedroom outside Redding, California. The ventilator had been removed at his insistence, the blinds were drawn against spring sun, and the man who once rattled arena rafters with outlaw anthems passed beneath a ceiling fan that spun like a muted applause sign. So few feet crossed the threshold in those last weeks that hospital staff wrote directions on a sticky note for any rare visitor, lest they get lost in the echoing hallway. How did a restless Okie kid who grew into a Hall of Fame icon, a Grammy magnet, and the voice of hard truth wind up escorted to eternity by scarcely more than a nurse, a weary wife, and one quietly sobbing son? That riddle stretches back through boxcar poverty, prison bars, stadium lights, burn-piled friendships, and finally the tall, stubborn walls an aging legend built to protect himself from disappointment, but that ended up imprisoning him far more effectively than San Quentin ever did.
21 imprisoned in life without parole.
Loneliness first crept into Merle's bones long before fame ever flirted with his name. Born in 1937 to James and Flossie Haggard, he spent his earliest years inside a converted boxcar parked on a dusty lot near Oildale, the kind of shanty town where tumbleweeds were cheaper than toys. Jim Haggard held the family together with gentle jokes and harmonica riffs, until a sudden stroke in 1945 yanked him from the dinner table and into an early grave. At 9, Merle watched the coffin slide into the earth and felt something solid snap loose inside him. Trust in permanence. Flossie, drowning in grief and double shifts as a bookkeeper, clamped down on her free-spirited boy, but the discipline only sparked rebellion. He hopped freight trains to Fresno just to watch the fields roll by, shoplifted RC colas from corner markets, and was hauled home by police often enough that locals joked the patrol car was his school bus. Each arrest widened the gap between the restless son and the widowed mother who couldn't understand why the world wasn't enough for him. By 13, he had tasted juvenile hall. By 15, he was sleeping under pool tables after bar closes, guitar for a pillow, convinced songs were better company than any human being who might leave again. Small crimes snowballed like rolling quarters downhill. A botched attempt to break into a Bakersfield restaurant ended with Merle staring at a county judge who called him incorrigible, a word he didn't yet know but somehow felt accurate. Released on probation, he celebrated with a joyride in a stolen '51 Pontiac. This time the court decided the boy needed steel walls to learn manners. San Quentin State Prison received inmate A45200 on New Year's Eve 1957, a date Merle later swore felt colder than any winter he had ever met. The prison yard was a brutal choir, shivs scraping concrete, curses ricocheting off limestone, and the eternal clock tick of footsteps on patrol catwalks. Within weeks, he joined an inmate gambling ring, brewed cell block liquor, and plotted an escape that never advanced beyond whispered maps. One drunken night, he landed in solitary for slugging a guard who mispronounced his name. 2 weeks in the dark taught him the only dependable friend was the echo of his own voice. So he began to sing, low at first, then louder, discovering resonance in misery. Fellow convicts banged rhythm on the walls, and in that bleak choir stall, Merle realized talent could be a skeleton key. January 1st, 1959 changed everything. Johnny Cash strode into the prison auditorium clad in black and electricity, belting songs about sorrow that sounded like parole stamped in 4/4 time. Merle watched from the third row, shackled emotionally if not physically, marveling that a man from the free world would architect art out of the same despair inmates inhaled daily. After the concert, he begged the warden for a pawnshop guitar. Nights that once throbbed with violence turned into impromptu concerts held in bunk rooms thick with cigarette haze. He learned to bend strings until they wept, practiced writing verses on toilet paper, and earned the nickname Hag. Short, sharp, impossible to forget. Parole came in 1960, stamped with a warning that one misstep meant a lifetime return. Merle tucked a notebook of prison songs into his duffel, swore off petty theft, and stepped outside the gates certain the only respectable hustle he possessed was music. Freedom hit like a drum break. He hitchhiked to Bakersfield, talked his way into the Blackboard Cafe House Band, and unleashed a voice so raw listeners thought glass might crack. Capitol Records took a chance in 1962. By 1965, he owned the country charts with back-to-back hits that married twang to autobiography. Mama Tried confessed his failures. Branded Man admitted prison stigma. Okie from Muskogee stirred national debate by both mocking and embodying conservative pride. Tour buses rolled coast to coast, converting hard labor stories into box office receipts. He bought a Learjet acreage in Northern California and enough rhinestone suits to fill a semi, but success offered a hidden invoice. The larger the crowds, the deeper the suspicion that nobody saw the real man behind the legend. Interviews grew curt, backstage passes were rationed. Merle began saying goodbye before anyone could get close enough to abandon him first. Creativity, however, did not wither under the glare of celebrity. If anything, it accelerated. Merle wrote on airplanes, in restroom stalls, even in traffic jams, scraping phrases onto matchbooks when paper hit itself. He kept a dictaphone beside his pillow to capture melody fragments that arrived just before sleep. Bandmates told stories of being shaken awake at 3 a.m. because he'd dreamed a chord change that couldn't wait till morning. Unlike writers who chased crossover polish, Merle trusted conversational plainness. If a lyric didn't sound credible spoken across a diner counter, he tossed it. Yet simplicity never neutered depth. Songs like Kern River mourned both lost lovers and vanishing rural landscapes, while If We Make It Through December wrapped economic despair in lullaby gentleness. Critics labeled him a conservative voice, but the catalog revealed a restless thinker willing to interrogate injustice, from prisoner rights to class divides. The dichotomy puzzled commentators who preferred neat boxes, and Merle's refusal to self-brand added to the mystery. He once told Rolling Stone, "I'm not left or right. I'm out front trying to see where the ditch is so I don't drive into it." The quip became shorthand for his entire ethos. Stay moving, stay honest, stay unpredictable. Long after chart peaks faded, he still mailed fresh lyrics to publishers on yellow legal paper, insisting that relevance belonged to anyone stubborn enough to keep writing, even if the radio gatekeepers had already moved on to younger fashions. With fame came endless miles of asphalt and an arsenal of chemical shortcuts to survive them. Coffee lost its punch, so amphetamines took over. After-show adrenaline wrecked sleep, so whiskey and tranquilizers alternated night shifts. Bandmates joked that the medicine cabinet in Hagg's tour bus rattled louder than the engine belts. Some nights he dazzled, hitting every note with preacher conviction. Other nights he slurred lyrics, stared blankly at the steel guitar player, and had to be led gently off stage. Rumors spread. Backstage fistfights, hotel room televisions heaved into swimming pools. A fist threw a gold record when the mastering sounded too polished. Each headline chipped away at support systems. Old prison buddies quit answering calls, unable to stomach another bail request. Producers learned to record vocals before noon while his voice was still steady. Fans kept buying tickets, but the man inside the spotlight started feeling like a cardboard cutout controlled by substances he no longer commanded. Deep down, he feared sobriety would leave him alone with ghosts he had spent decades muffling. Romance should have countered that whirlpool, yet Merle's love life looped the same tragic chorus. His first marriage to waitress Leona Hobbs produced 4 children and countless arguments over empty bank accounts. When success finally arrived, prosperity didn't glue them together. It magnified old cracks, and divorce followed in 1964. 2 years later, he wed Bonnie Owens, a fellow singer who nurtured his career like a mission field, smoothing his temper, restitching torn stage shirts, even babysitting his kids from the previous union. But touring bred temptations stronger than devotion, and by 1978 they too signed dissolution papers, Bonnie gallantly continuing to sing backup on his shows even after the judge's gavel fell. Next came songbird Leona Williams, whose duet albums with Merle suggested harmony no lawyer could break. Behind closed doors, they fought over set lists, songwriting credits, and the growing distance between their ambitions. The divorce count climbed. Wives 4 and 5, Deborah, brief as a summer storm, and Teresa, steady yet often shut out, entered the timeline like reprieves that couldn't arrest the root problem. Merle trusted craft, not intimacy. Whenever a spouse inched too near the fault lines of his insecurity, he packed another suitcase and chased the neon where applause drowned conversation. Children learned love through postcards and Christmas Eve voicemails. They loved him fiercely anyway, but their visits revolved around tour routing, not hearth and home. Slowly, family gatherings shrank to photo ops staged by publicists. Years of nicotine and diesel exhaust finally turned rebellion into biology. In 1999, doctors removed a cancerous growth from his lung. He walked out of the hospital the next morning against orders, holding the IV port closed with tape and laughing that death would have to catch him on the road. But mortality had traction now. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease settled like rust in his airways, and congestive heart failure tugged energy from his limbs. Set lists shortened, keys dropped a half step. After one collapsed lung emergency in 2008, he announced retirement, then reversed it a month later, saying quiet life made him itch like poison oak. Still, each mile cost more breath than the last. By 2013, he toted portable oxygen onto the bus and pretended it was just another amplifier. Friends watching from the wings saw the cannula imprint on his cheeks, yet he waved off concern with a drawled joke and a wink that failed to hide exhaustion. One bright flash briefly softened the distrust. In 1972, California Governor Ronald Reagan, a former actor who appreciated narrative redemption, issued Merle a full pardon, expunging the felony conviction that had shadowed every airport security line and border crossing. The news reached Merle via telegram while he was sound-checking in Fort Worth. Crew members recall him sitting on an amp, eyes wet, whispering that his mama could finally brag without qualifiers. For a moment he seemed lighter, joking that he might run for sheriff back in Oildale. But the glow faded when tabloids suggested the pardon was political theater. Merle doubled down on privacy again, muttering that kindness always came with a hidden invoice, and he shelved the idea of public gratitude, filing the pardon certificate in a drawer nobody ever saw. Controversy shadowed him like a second tour bus, especially after 1969 when Okie from Muskogee vaulted beyond radio to the evening news. Middle America embraced the anthem's proud rejection of draft card burning while the counterculture blasted him as a reactionary pawn. Merle claimed the song was partly tongue-in-cheek, yet he enjoyed watching journalists squirm when he doubled down. The tension sold records, but carved another moat between Hag and peers. Bob Dylan adored the storytelling and tried to collaborate. Merle deflected, fearing ideological clashes. During Vietnam, he performed for troops in Saigon, then returned to protests at home. In 1980, he backed Jimmy Carter for rural aid, angering conservative DJs and amusing liberals. The IRS soon audited him for unpaid taxes, presenting a $1 million bill that cemented his siege mentality. He sold property, liquidated vehicles, and toured relentlessly to pay it, convinced the government sought to punish an ex-con. After that, even surprise birthday cards stayed sealed until inspected. Friends learned visits required advance clearance and a dose of bravery. The risk of rejection kept many away. Meanwhile, the genre he helped shape rolled past him on chrome rims. Bro-country hits about tailgates and sugar shaker jeans dominated radio. When an interviewer asked his opinion, Merle quipped that songs now sounded like keggers with drum machines. He became both elder statesman and curmudgeon, invited to award shows for standing ovations yet rarely to recording sessions. Chris Christopherson called. Merle let it go to voicemail. Willie Nelson drove his bus up to the ranch gate unannounced one afternoon. Security guards, unsure whether to wake the boss, turned Nelson away after an awkward phone consult. Merle later claimed he was sleeping, but insiders said pride kept him from accepting comfort he hadn't summoned. The ranch grew quieter. Studio outbuildings once bustling with pickers dimmed to storage sheds. A spiral notebook of unreleased lyrics sat untouched atop a piano, losing its tune with every season shift. In December 2015, pneumonia hammered him into Mercy Medical Center. Doctors drained fluid, pumped antibiotics, and urged a lengthy admission, but Merle signed himself out on Christmas Eve, growling that hospitals stole holidays. Teresa converted the master bedroom into an ICU-light suite. Oxygen concentrator, heart monitor, and an antique radio tuned forever to classic country. He spent nights dozing and waking in fits, staring at the ceiling fan as if its blades could rewind time. Visitors were limited to immediate family, yet even they faced unpredictable moods. One son drove 9 hours only to be told through the closed door, "Come back when I'm upright." Daughters left casseroles on the porch, texting reassurances they never got responses to. Only longtime guitarist Scott Joss gained semi-regular clearance, slipping in to play gently at bedside. Between songs, Merle whispered regrets about bandmates he'd fired, children he'd missed graduating, and wives whose birthdays blurred. But then he'd catch himself, clenched fist, lifting off the sheet, and declare he wasn't begging forgiveness from anybody. In early April, his fever spiked. A hospice nurse suggested transferring him back to the hospital for stronger intervention. He refused. April 5th, storm clouds low, he predicted to Teresa. "Tomorrow, on my birthday, that's when I go." "It's tidy." She cried. He closed his eyes. At 9:20 a.m. on April 6th, his breathing rattled, paused, rattled again, then stopped completely as "If I Could Only Fly" drifted from the radio. The nurse noted the time, Teresa kissed his forehead, and the room settled into a hush so profound the dog outside stopped barking. News shot across the internet faster than any tour bus ever carried him. Hashtags trended globally within an hour. Politicians who once criticized his protest songs tweeted sanitized condolences. Younger artists filmed acoustic covers on iPhones, uploading tear-streaked renditions to prove lineage. Yet behind every post lay a quieter truth. Most of them hadn't dialed his number in years because they'd learned the call wouldn't connect. The funeral held at his ranch per his will was invitation only. Seats numbered fewer than a small club gig. Chris Christopherson sang "Sing Me Back Home," unamplified, voice cracking on the high notes. Willie Nelson placed a battered red bandana in the coffin, murmuring, "For the road." When they lowered the casket, the sky opened with rain so sudden everybody laughed through tears, convinced Hag had ordered one last dramatic lighting cue. That evening, country stations looped a marathon of his hits. Listeners called in, telling stories of factory shifts survived because his voice promised dignity in hard times. Years from now, historians will still dissect his catalog for its fearless social commentary, but the cautionary tale buried beneath the chords may echo louder. San Quentin taught Merle Haggard that a man survives by trusting no one. Fame convinced him that love is conditional. Addiction convinced him he wasn't worth unconditional love even if it appeared. Each belief felt protective, yet together they forged a fortress that kept out the very rescue he secretly craved. When illness finally breached the walls, there was no army left inside to rally, only a weary troubadour humming a song about freedom he could describe better than he could live. The legend endures. Vinyl spins, digital streams tally millions, and some child not yet born will one day discover that voice and feel understood. But the man behind the music left a simpler epitaph, spoken to a nurse the night before he died. "Tell them I did my best and tell them not to end up alone." It was the last verse he ever wrote, and like most of his best lines, no one could forget it once they'd heard it.